In addition to the many large and influential civilizations which thrived across the Alpha and Beta Quadrants, there were also many lesser powers, sometimes referred to as commercial and isolationist societies, such as the Ferengi alliance of Ferenginar, a mercantile culture who purchased warp technology and used it to establish trade routes throughout the quadrant and beyond. Governed by a Grand Nagus, the Bill of Opportunities acted as their constitution, while the rules of acquisition were their legal and moral code, with even their religion focused around profit, as it stated Ferengi must use the wealth they earned in life to bribe the blessed exchequer after death, in order to gain entry into the divine treasury. Should they prove too poor, they would be cast into the vault of eternal destitution. Unwilling to risk alienating potential customers, the Ferengi remained neutral in most conflicts, preferring to settle disputes through negotiation and economic pressure rather than warfare. Although many other species saw the Ferengi as greedy, dishonest, craven, and manipulative, they often saw themselves as morally superior because their desire for non-violent, financially beneficial solutions meant they had no history of genocide, military conquest, or participation in large-scale wars. They also claimed to have never practiced slavery, though this was false, as females in their society were forbidden from pursuing profit, participating in government, or wearing clothes in public, and were expected to devote themselves entirely to birthing children and serving the men in their lives, though their economic and legal system meant only the most ruthless and greedy prospered, while the rest of their population lived in poverty. By the end of the 24th century, Grand Nagus Zek and his successor Rom began to reform their society, giving females equal rights and imposing taxes to pay for social programs. One of the most mysterious species of the Alpha Quadrant, the Breen of the Breen Confederacy, were isolationist and fiercely territorial, always appearing in environmental suits, which suggested the atmosphere of their homeworld was vastly different to that of other humanoids. Yet later sources revealed their planet was perfectly hospitable, meaning they wore their suits for other reasons. Known as Great Warriors, the Klingon Empire once sent a fleet of their best ships into Breen space, where they disappeared and were never heard from again. Their violent and unpredictable nature led the Romulans to develop a popular expression, "Never turn your back on a Breen." During the Dominion War of the late 24th century, the Breen joined the Dominion-Cardassian alliance, and in doing so, helped shift the tide of battle in favor of the invasion force. But in the end, they were defeated by the Federation alliance, and forced to retreat back into their space. The Tholians of the Tholian Assembly were a powerful, isolationist, non-humanoid species hostile to those who violated their borders. Though they largely kept to themselves, they engaged in minor battles with the Federation and Klingons throughout the 24th century, though it did not escalate into a full-scale conflict. During the Dominion War, they chose to stay out of the fighting and signed a non-aggression treaty with the Gamma Quadrant forces. Another non-humanoid power were the Sheliak of the Sheliak Corporate, isolationist xenophobes who considered other species as lower life forms. In 2255, they signed a peace treaty with the Federation and broke off contact for over a century until they discovered a group of human settlers on one of their planets. Since this violated the treaty, Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise was sent to organize their evacuation. The Talarians were another xenophobic people who wore gloves when interacting with other species and engaged in minor skirmishes with the Federation throughout the 24th century, though full-scale war was avoided. A highly competitive population, they developed a strictly patriarchal society where women were not allowed to outrank men. The Bajorans of Bajor were one of the oldest civilizations in the Alpha Quadrant, with their history dating back 500,000 years. A deeply spiritual people, they worshipped a group of non-corporeal aliens called the Prophets, who lived in a nearby wormhole and seemed to have a relationship with the people of this planet, despite having little direct contact. Though they had interstellar spaceships by the 16th century, Bajorans did not place much emphasis on technological development, and so were unable to adequately defend themselves when the Cardassian Union invaded in 2319. By 2328, their planet was annexed and people enslaved, but the Bajorans resisted, forming terrorist cells to fight against their oppressors. Though the struggle took decades, they were eventually victorious, liberating Bajor in 2369, after which they applied for membership in the Federation. Yet when the Bajoran wormhole was discovered, and war broke out in the Alpha Quadrant, they found themselves at the mercy of the invaders, and so temporarily distanced themselves from the Federation to sign a non-aggression treaty with the Dominion. Reptilian humanoids ruled by the Gorn hegemony. The Gorn were an independent power who engaged the Federation in a brief military conflict over the possession of a colony. As captain of the Enterprise, James T. Kirk gained fame for defeating a Gorn warrior in combat, though he showed mercy and did not kill the creature. Despite their reputation as physically large and imposing warriors, their species was also known for brewing Meridor, a blue alcoholic drink well known throughout the quadrant. Deep within the Delphic expanse was the planet of Zindis, home to 6 species which evolved alongside each other, fighting terrible wars which eventually destroyed their homeworld and exterminated the avian population. This devastation led the remaining reptilians, insectoids, primates, aquatics, and arboreals to make peace and form an alliance, while they settled their people on other worlds. During this time of hardship, they were visited by a group of trans-dimensional aliens called the Guardians, who helped them survive and in return were revered as religious figures. Yet these beings had an ulterior motive, and falsely informed the Zindi they were under threat from humanity, convincing them to launch an attack on Earth in 2153. However, Captain Jonathan Archer and the crew of the Enterprise managed to expose the deception and forge a lasting peace. Led by an autarch, the Zankethi species fought a war with the Federation in the 24th century, and nearly went to war again in 2371, when a changeling infiltrator nearly convinced a Starfleet ship to attack their homeworld without provocation, as part of the Dominion's continued campaign to weaken the Alpha Quadrant before invasion. Originating in the Orion system, the Orion Syndicate were a criminal organization who engaged in black market slave trading, gambling, racketeering, extortion, and smuggling. By the 24th century, they had influence across the Alpha and Beta Quadrants, working and trading with anyone willing to pay. And so when the Dominion War erupted, the Dominion-Cardassian Alliance worked with the Syndicate, using their connections to organize spy and stealth operations within the Federation Alliance. Once an advanced spacefaring civilization, the species later known as the Baku were on the verge of self-annihilation until a group of them settled on a quiet planet in 2066 and abandoned their dependence on technology in order to live lives of simplicity and peace. However, not all were content with this new lifestyle, and so a faction tried to rebel and take over the planet, only to fail and be exiled into space, where they became the Sona, aggressive nomads who colonized other worlds and practiced slavery, subjugating the Allura and Tarlik species. After years of conflict with the Federation resulting in numerous economic sanctions, the Sona eventually stopped trading in slaves, but remained their enemies, allying with the Gamma Quadrant forces during the Dominion War. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Arhael the Silent Blade, Magic the Shaman, Belligerent Man, and Q Straight Arrow Valverde. If you'd like to help CivilizationEx, click on the Patreon link, and please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to see more.